Fresa y Chocolate was a very interesting film. I can't say I fully understood everything about it, but it intrigued me nonetheless. For this video, we were tasked with discussing the roles that the character Diego played in a society like Cuba. Well, Diego played a particularly important role, in my opinion. Just by being himself, Diego challenged many norms in Cuban society at that time. First and foremost, Diego was a gay man. At this point in Cuba, it was expected that all men follow the typical masculine stereotype. Gay people were marginalized, bullied, and sometimes even thrown in jail. There was a big emphasis put on the typical family structure, and kids were taught that being gay was bad. In relation to the reading about gender performance by Judith Butler, we can see that Diego was obviously rejecting typical gender performance. This is a perfect example of the idea that Butler was trying to get across. Gender is not something that you are born with and stuck with. Rather, it's a way that you learn to act. While most men at this time learned to perform in a very typical masculine way, Diego did just the opposite. Secondly, Diego was not a communist. He was obviously in the minority with this stance. As far as putting this in the frame of Michael Foucault, I think Fresa y Chocolate showed a perfect example of how discourse is used to maintain power. In Cuba's communist society, there was obviously some discourse between people who agreed with communism and those who didn't. Those who were on the communist side saw it as their responsibility to either convert the other side or report them to the authorities. This is why David started hanging out with Diego in the first place. He was essentially trying to be a spy for the Youth Communist League. Now, the Youth Communist League is particularly interesting to me. I think that this league was a genius idea for the communists. It's most easy to indoctrinate youth into a belief system. They built a movement where kids were constantly surrounded by communism. All their friends and all their authority figures preached it to them. It would be very hard to understand a different perspective if you weren't exposed to any other perspectives in the first place. All in all, I think without this discourse between its own citizens, Cuba would not have been able to maintain communist power. This leads me to the last aspect of the film I want to discuss. I love that even though the relationship started under false pretenses, Diego and David genuinely grew to respect each other and enjoy each other's company. They might have had very different belief systems, but they kept an open mind and were willing to listen to each other's perspectives. In the end, I'm sure they both learned new things from each other and developed a more well-rounded worldview. I have many friends who I don't agree with on everything. It can be stupid stuff, like which movie is the best, or it can be bigger issues. Obviously right now, the election is on my mind. However, I've been blessed by the fact that the loved ones who I disagree with are always open to have a conversation about whatever the topic may be. I've learned so much from the people around me with different perspectives, and I hope they can say the same for themselves. So, Edgard, I'm glad you changed the syllabus, because I think this week was the perfect time to show this film. It's a great reminder that you may have different beliefs than your neighbor, but that doesn't always make them the enemy.